an elderly man who was considered a priest and who was considered by many to be very holy, a very holy and spiritual man, once made a confession at a very candid moment. And he said, you know, I have always loved God, but I have almost never trusted God. I have always loved Jesus, but I have almost never trusted Jesus. In our gospel, we have the calling of the disciples. And we know then that Jesus is not a rabbi. He's much more than a rabbi, because that's not how it's not how rabbis get disciples. If you want to be the disciple of a rabbi, you have to pick one out that you think is going to be a person of holiness and a good person to study with. And then you have to ask them if you can be their disciple. And traditionally, you have to ask 3 times, because the rabbi is going to say no for the first 2 to see if you're really serious. Back the 3rd time, he can maybe say, okay. And then you follow him and you begin to study, and you start to study Torah. But that's not what disciples of Jesus do. Disciples of Jesus don't first of all choose him. Jesus chooses them. That's a crucial difference. They don't choose to follow Jesus. They are called to follow Jesus. Jesus first chooses them, and then they say yes and choose him. Jesus calls us all. And so we have this wonderful story of the calling of Peter and James and John. And of course, it's not just the story about how they're called, it's also the story about how we get called by Jesus as well. But it's a great story. So we can see from the story that Peter also has a brother named Andrew. It's Peter, James, and John are there. And James, or the father of one of them, the Zebedees, they have a fishing business. They're small businessmen, is what it amounts to. They've got 2 boats, obviously, in their fishing business. These boats are enough to carry about 12 people each. And so they've got the family business there, along with some hired men, and they've got a small business. And they know how to catch fish. That's what they do. And so how does Jesus call them? First of all, he's been preaching on the shore there, and then he called, have Peter, let me preach in your boat. So Peter's hearing him. And what we begin to see is the difference between fans and followers. Because that's something that's really strong here, because there are fans of Jesus here who just came to listen to his words. But then there are also people where Jesus says, follow me, and they become followers. And so fans are people who are impressed by the words. They love, powerful, strong speeches and lovely words, and they will go to conferences and lectures, and they're just really impressed by words, and they become fans. You know, that Jesus guy, I'm one of his biggest fans. I'm telling you, he tells these stories that are like so vivid because he's so in touch with just the average everything part of our lives, and there's such a nice turn of phrase that I'll tell you, I love to hear those stories. I'm one of Jesus' biggest fans. But that's all it is. Jesus doesn't trust himself to fans, because that goes about this deep. And so there's a difference between a fan and a follower. Because fans are impressed with words, but followers are impressed with actions. And so followers have to be able to say about somebody, they see somebody who gets into a situation where their integrity and their could be compromised. It's a difficult situation where a difficult decision has to be made. And they see somebody act with a greater integrity than they have. And they say, that guy or that woman is living at a deeper level than I am. I want what they have. That's what a follower is. A follower is not, we followers want their leaders to speak, of course. But what makes them a follower is not words, it's actions. And so, what is Jesus doing to get Simon how does he call him? We need to remember that when Jesus is calling Simon, he's not just calling him. It's about the calling of all of us. The way he calls Simon is the way he calls us. So how does he do it? So he says to him, Simon's there listening to him, and what he says is, go out into the deep, Simon. Get that boat out farther than it was before and let the nets down. Go out into the deep. And it's what Jesus does. He moves Simon to another situation. He says, get out of the situation that you're in, because you've been doing that over and over again all night. And what have you caught? You've been doing the same thing over and over again. Where did it get you? How's it going? Because you haven't caught anything. So something about it's not working. Get out into deeper water and let your nets down then. And Peter, of course, doesn't, he's the expert fisherman. Well, I'll tell you, Jesus, I know about fishermen. I got a fisherman business, and I can tell you, I've been marking all night and there's nothing there. Well, of course, he does it. He follows Jesus' words and he gets out into deeper water. And then what Jesus does is puts him in touch with transcendence, with holiness, with the divine. Because the boats, there are so many fish that the boats are in danger of swamping. And so obviously, this is the touch of the divine in his world. In Catholic theology, we define the supernatural is when something is out of proportion to the natural. When we look at something and we go, that is just out of proportion to what naturally happens. And so this is a supernatural event. This puts Peter in touch with something more, with something greater, with an extra, with an overflow, with a magis. This puts him in trouble with something that's greater than the natural, because he knows about natural fish and he knows this is totally out of proportion to anything that has to do with natural fishing. This is supernatural. This is the transcendent. This is the divine that has touched his life. And so his reaction is the reaction of all of us when that happens. He comes and says, I'm not worthy. Not me, somebody else, but not me. I'm not worthy. And that's what always happens to us when the divine touches our lives. When we touch the transcendent in a strong and vivid way, we feel unworthy and we say, well, not me, Jesus. I think you should probably, it's like in the first, we start mimicking the speaker, Isaiah, in the first reading, who's at the end of the reading says, here I am, Lord, send me. Well, we start saying, well, here I am, Lord, but send Sister Phyllis. Here I am, Lord, but send my sister. Could you? She's way more devout than I am. Here I am, Lord, but send somebody else, not me. And then, of course, what Jesus then says to him is what we all need to hear when we feel that God has touched our lives and has called us. Not our decision, but God's decision, who says, no, second of all, you have to choose me. But first of all, I choose you. I have worked for you. Get your boat out to deeper water in life. You've been doing the same old thing over and over. And how's that working for you? Are you catching fish? You're doing the same thing over and over. Well, you're not catching anything. Get out into deeper water with me in faith, in trust, and put down those nets for a catch and see if the transcendent and the divine won't touch your life with something more. And so Peter says, Basically, I'm scared. Not me, somebody else. And then Jesus says to him those wonderful words that are the most often, the phrase that's most often repeated in the entire Bible: do not be afraid. Do not be afraid. And we're always afraid when the divine touches our lives. We're always scared by it. We're scared by it, and that is what the holy is like. That's an experience of the holy, is we are attracted to it, we're fascinated by it, we want it, we're also scared to death, and we're repulsed by it, and we want to get away, but we also want to go towards it. That's the sign of the holy. That's what holiness is about. It's so awesome that we are both attracted and we're both scared to death of it. And Jesus says what we need to hear: do not be afraid. Now, this is the calling of the disciples, but it's also the calling of us, of course. And so, where is it that Jesus is saying to us, get out into deeper water? You've been doing the same old thing over and over, and you haven't caught anything there. Change your situation, get into deeper spiritual water, take a spiritual risk, become a spiritual entrepreneur, get out deeper. Where is Jesus saying that in our lives? And I don't think anybody can tell you where that is. But here are some suggestions. Maybe it's to trust God more, because we've always loved God, but we haven't trusted him very much. Maybe it's to trust God more. Maybe it's to look at that place in our life where we've been doing something over and over and over again, and we're not catching anything. The nets are coming up empty. And it's time to change, switch our situation, get into something different, and put down the nets and see if God won't touch our lives there. No one can tell you where it is that God is calling you, but we do know this: God is calling all of us, because God knows our names and he calls all of us by name. And we don't first of all choose God. God first of all chooses us. It says, follow me. Then we choose God. And so, however God is calling us, we don't have the luxury to say, here I am, Lord, send somebody else. We don't have the luxury to say, along with Peter, you got to go away from me because I'm a sinful man. You can't be called. No, you can't be calling me. No, you can't be serious. No, really. No, why don't you call Leaf? Leaf is a professional religious guy. Why don't you call him? We don't have that option, because we don't, first of all, choose Jesus. Jesus, first of all, has chosen us. And so, whatever it is in our lives, wherever it is that God is calling us to go out deeper, into deeper water, this is a time to begin to pray about that. And also for our parish. Where's the deeper water for our parish? Where is Jesus calling us out to something deeper? Is it the synodality process? No one can tell you what it is about your life, but I can tell you this: when God puts his finger on us and calls us, God is always going to say what he said to Peter: do not be afraid. I know you're afraid. Do not be afraid. Follow me.